Chapter 1, I've made up my mind. I'll be the one to marry the Crestwood family's man in a coma. Rosalind Ashwood leaned against the doorframe of the old Ashwood estate, a sarcastic smirk playing on her red lips. Her father's cigar nearly fell onto the priceless Persian rug. He shot up from his leather armchair, the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes smoothing out. "Rosalind, you've come to your senses? Wonderful, the Crestwood family has been pressing us. The wedding has to be in South City within the fortnight. What style of wedding dress do you like? Dad will have one ordered for you." "That's it," Rosalind sneered. "I'm marrying in place of your beloved illegitimate daughter, and you're not going to show a little appreciation." The temperature in the living room plummeted. Richard Ashwood's face darkened. "Watch your mouth. What illegitimate daughter? That's your sister." "Sisters share a mother," she said with a light, icy laugh. "She's the product of your affair. I'll never acknowledge her." A vein throbbed on her father's temple, but he managed to swallow his anger before it erupted. He took a deep breath, the ash from his cigar crumbling. "What do you want?" $10 billion, she said, her red lips parting slightly. "And once I'm married, transfer Ethan Vaughn to protect your precious illegitimate daughter." Her father's expression froze. He stared at his daughter as if she were a madwoman. "Are you insane? $10 billion would wipe out all my liquid assets and Ethan Vaughn? Isn't he your favorite bodyguard? You used to throw fits about wanting to marry him. You're getting married and you're not taking him with you." "Just tell me if you agree or not," Rosalind said, growing impatient and turning to leave. "Fine," her father slammed his hand on the table. "The day you go to South City to get married, I'll have both matters settled." He didn't bother to question her motives, eager to lock this down. Years ago, when the sole heir of the Crestwood family was at the height of his glory, Richard had rushed to arrange a marriage, planning to wed Ivy to him and secure a good future for his younger daughter. Who would have known that a tragic accident would leave the Crestwood heir in a vegetative state? He couldn't bear to see Ivy suffer, which was when he remembered that Rosalind, too, was his daughter. She waved a hand at him without looking back, the sharp click of her heels on the marble floor sounding like a slap across someone's face. Just as she grasped the doorknob, her father's voice came from behind her again. "I can understand you wanting money, but don't you adore Ethan Vaughn? How can you bear to give him to Ivy?" Rosalind's fingers stiffened. She didn't turn around, but her eyes suddenly burned. That name was like a thorn, stabbing viciously into the softest part of her heart. She shoved the door open, shutting her father and his question behind her. It was late at night by the time she returned to her villa. As Rosalind walked up the stairs in her high heels, she heard a suppressed gasp coming from Ethan Vaughn's room. The door was slightly ajar. She looked up and saw the scene inside with perfect clarity. Ethan was leaning against the headboard, a photograph pinched between his long fingers, his other hand moving rhythmically beneath the waistband of his pants. His eyes were closed, his Adam's apple bobbed, and a low, sensual voice escaped his lips. "Ivy, baby, so good." It was a picture of Ivy Ashwood. It had been taken at her birthday party last year. She was wearing a white dress, her smile pure and innocent. Rosalind's nails dug into the strap of her Hermes bag, leaving deep crescent marks, as she finally answered her father's question in her mind. "Because, just like you, he only loves Ivy Ashwood." The answer churned inside her, scorching her from the inside out. 3 years ago, she had first met Ethan Vaughn on the day she was selecting a bodyguard. Among a crowd of tall, burly men, her eyes had landed on him instantly. The reason was simple. He was ridiculously handsome. 6'2", with broad shoulders, a narrow waist, and sharp features. His dark eyes were especially cold, as if they'd been quenched in ice. Rosalind was known in their social circle as a vixen, and she had initially wanted to toy with him. But in the 3 years that followed, she'd deliberately gotten drunk and fallen into his arms, only for him to lift her by the scruff of her neck like a kitten and place her back on the sofa. She'd knocked on his door in the middle of the night wearing a silk slip, and he'd immediately wrapped his suit jacket around her entirely, respectfully escorting her back to her room. She'd even pretended to drown in the pool, and when he jumped in to save her, he hadn't even touched her waist. No matter how she flirted, he was impervious to her charms, always respectfully and dutifully calling her Miss Ashwood. But against all odds, she had fallen for him. She didn't know how it happened. Perhaps it was because, after her mother's death, she had been so utterly alone. When she was 7, her father's affair came to light, and he brought home an illegitimate daughter. The girl, Ivy Ashwood, was only 3 months younger than her. It turned out that in 10 years of marriage, he had been cheating for 9 of them. That day, the happy, peaceful family she thought she had was shattered. At the time, her mother, Eleonora, was 9 months pregnant with her father's second child, just days away from giving birth. Eleonora had loved Richard to the point of madness. She confronted him, hysterical, crying until she could barely breathe. That night, the stress induced labor. She was rushed to the hospital but died before she could even make it to the operating room, taking the unborn child with her. From that day on, Rosalind hated her father, and she hated Ivy Ashwood. She moved out of the family estate, went to school alone, ate alone, and grew up alone. It wasn't until she grew so beautiful that she was constantly harassed by the rich playboys in their circle that she decided to hire a bodyguard. Ethan Vaughn was her first. From then on, she wasn't alone anymore. Ethan was with her for everything. Her feelings for him evolved from appreciation to flirtation and then to love. But in 3 years, over 1,000 days and nights, he had never so much as blinked for her. She thought he was just naturally cold, until the day she caught him pleasuring himself to Ivy's photo. Then she watched as he finished and answered a call. "Mr. Vaughn, how long are you going to keep up this bodyguard charade? You're the Prince of North City, you can have any woman you want. You fell for Ivy Ashwood at first sight, just take her. Why are you being so sentimental, playing bodyguard for her sister just to see her?" Ethan's expression was cool. "I've looked into it. Ivy is the illegitimate daughter. She's had a hard life and lacks security. Pursuing her aggressively would scare her. I want to take it slow." "Right. Who knew the Vaughn family would produce such a devoted fool? I thought with that vixen, Miss Ashwood, throwing herself at you every day, you might have been tempted. I'm telling you, she's famous in our circle. The line of men who want her could stretch from here to Paris." Ethan seemed to chuckle, but his next words plunged her into an icy abyss. "Is that so? Not interested. She's not worth a single strand of Ivy's hair." Every word was a knife, stabbing viciously into Rosalind's heart. In that moment, she stopped loving Ethan Vaughn, too. She didn't know how long the scene inside had been going on, but for some reason, Ethan was taking an unusually long time to finish. Seeing this, she curled her lips into a cold smile and violently pushed the door open. Chapter 2, the moment Ethan Vaughn looked up. Rosalind saw an endless darkness in his eyes. Perhaps because he was naturally a man of power, he showed no flicker of emotion at being caught. He calmly slipped the photo under his pillow, his long fingers unhurriedly tucking the impressive bulge back into his trousers. In seconds, he had reverted to his abstinent and distant demeanor, as if the man who had lost control just moments ago was a mere illusion. Rosalind couldn't help but sneer. "Putting it away before you're finished. Aren't you afraid of getting backed up? Need a hand?" Ethan's expression didn't change. He simply leaned back, creating distance between them. "Is there something you need, Miss Ashwood?" He was always like this. A photo of Ivy Ashwood could arouse him, but in front of her, he was like a chaste monk. Rosalind's nails dug into her palm as she thought of Ivy's plain face. She didn't have Rosalind's figure or her looks, yet everyone fell for her innocent act. "Whatever, I, Rosalind Ashwood, have beauty, money, and a killer body. From this day forward, I want nothing to do with anyone who doesn't love me. There's an auction tomorrow. You're coming with me," she instructed coolly, then turned to leave. Ethan frowned. "I believe I requested 2 days off. I hear Ivy Ashwood will be there," she said without turning back. There was a moment of silence behind her, followed by the man's low reply, "Understood, Miss Ashwood." A needle-like pain pricked Rosalind's heart. Of course, the moment Ivy was mentioned, he would break any rule. "Don't worry. Soon, I'll deliver you to her myself." The next morning, as soon as Rosalind stepped out of the villa, she saw Ethan already waiting by the car. His black suit perfectly outlined his broad shoulders and narrow waist, and the morning sun cast a golden glow on his stern profile. In the past, she would have deliberately teased him at times like this, either by faking a sprained ankle to fall into his arms or by whispering seductively in his ear. But today, she just got into the car with a blank expression, not even sparing him a glance. Ethan seemed a bit surprised and looked at her for an extra moment, but he quickly averted his gaze and silently got into the passenger seat. As the car drove towards the auction house, Rosalind stared out the window the entire time, not trying to make conversation as she usually would. The car was so quiet you could hear them breathing. The auction was held at the most luxurious hotel downtown. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the hall as brightly as day, and the air was filled with the scent of expensive perfume and the sight of high society's elite. As soon as Rosalind entered, she saw Ivy standing ahead. Dressed in a white dress, with her long, straight black hair draped over her shoulders, she was chatting and laughing with a few socialites, looking utterly pure and harmless. Ethan's gaze changed instantly. Although he was still standing behind Rosalind, fulfilling his duty as a bodyguard, she could feel that his attention was now completely captivated by Ivy. "Sister," Ivy spotted them and immediately trotted over, affectionately taking Rosalind's arm. "What a coincidence, you're at the auction too?" Rosalind coldly pulled her arm away. "Don't touch me." Ivy's eyes immediately reddened as she looked aggrievedly at Ethan. "Ethan, I just wanted to be closer to my sister." Ethan's brow furrowed slightly, his eyes filled with a restrained disgust as he looked at Rosalind. Ivy seized the opportunity to tug on Ethan's sleeve. "Ethan, I heard that when I had a fever and was craving red bean cakes. You were the one who went out in the pouring rain at midnight to buy them and deliver them to our house. It's just that I was so sick, and I've been recovering these past few days, so I didn't get a chance to thank you." Ethan's stern features instantly softened. "You're too kind, Miss Ivy. I was just in the area." In the area? Rosalind sneered internally. That day, he was gone for 5 hours and came back soaked to the bone. That was his in the area. "I still have to treat you to a meal," Ivy said sweetly. This time, Ethan didn't refuse. "As you wish, Miss Ivy." "Then let's invite sister to join us." Ivy looked at Rosalind, then feigned surprise. "Oh, sister, why do you look so worn out?" "I was the one who was sick." Rosalind cut her off coldly. "Since when are we so close? You're the mistress's daughter. Mind your own business." Ivy's face fell, and Ethan's frown deepened. Just then, the auctioneer announced the start of the auction, finally interrupting the awkward conversation. Rosalind couldn't be bothered with her anymore and took her seat directly. She was about to marry into the Crestwood family, and it was unrealistic to expect her father to prepare a dowry. She had to prepare these things herself, which was the real reason she had come to this auction. After she sat down, the first lot was presented. A pigeon's blood ruby necklace with a starting bid of $1 million. She raised her paddle without hesitation. $2 million. To her surprise, Ivy also raised her paddle. $3 million. Rosalind looked at Ivy, who gave her a slight smile. "Sister, I like this piece too. You don't mind letting me have it, do you? After all, the allowance Dad gives you doesn't seem to be as much as mine." Rosalind sneered. It wasn't just less than hers. Ever since they were children, Richard Ashwood gave Ivy a monthly allowance of $5 million, while she only got $500. If it weren't for the inheritance her mother left her, she might have starved to death. But things were different now. She had $10 billion. $4 million. Rosalind raised her paddle again. Ivy was clearly stunned but gritted her teeth and raised the bid. $4.5 million. $5 million. $5.5 million. After several rounds of bidding, Ivy's face grew uglier. "Sister, where did you get so much money? Aren't you afraid you won't be able to pay?" $10 million. Rosalind doubled the price, then looked at her with a mocking smile. "I'm starting to think you're the one who can't afford it." Ivy's face turned shades of green and white, and the surrounding guests began to whisper among themselves. The auctioneer asked politely, "Miss Ivy Ashwood, do you wish to raise your bid?" "Wait a moment." Ivy hurriedly took out her phone to message her father. A moment later, her face grew even darker. She had clearly been rejected. Seeing this, Rosalind's lips curled into a smirk. It was obvious he would refuse. He had already given away $10 billion. Where would he find the money to save face for his precious daughter? Just at that awkward moment, a man in a sharp suit suddenly appeared in the center of the room and announced loudly. A clean sweep, Chapter 3. The entire hall erupted in an uproar. "Sir, are you saying?" the auctioneer asked in astonishment. The man explained, "I am Mr. Vaughn's assistant. Mr. Vaughn has instructed that any item Miss Ivy Ashwood shows interest in today will be purchased for her, at any price." The auction hall exploded. Mr. Vaughn, the sole heir to the Vaughn family, the famous Prince of North City, isn't he known for being immune to women? Why would he do this for Miss Ivy Ashwood? It looks like Miss Ivy is about to marry into the highest echelons of society. The buzz of conversation rose from all around. Ivy's expression went from shock to elation and finally to undisguised triumph. "May I ask where Mr. Vaughn is? Can I thank him in person?" Ivy asked, her face blushing. The assistant replied respectfully, "Mr. Vaughn cannot show himself at the moment. When the time is right, he will naturally meet with you." Only then did Ivy turn to Rosalind, her eyes filled with victorious delight. "Sister, are you still bidding?" The next second, she feigned innocence and added, "Oh, I almost forgot. Mr. Vaughn is covering my bids. If you keep going, you might go bankrupt. After all, in our circle, who could possibly be richer than Mr. Vaughn?" Rosalind's face turned pale. She shot a look at Ethan, only to see him gazing adoringly at Ivy, his eyes full of tenderness. The rest of the auction felt like a scene from a romantic drama. Any item Ivy so much as glanced at, the assistant immediately bought out. The ruby necklace, the Northern Song Dynasty Rue Ware tea set, even the Monet water lily painting with a starting bid of $80 million all went to Ivy Ashwood. Rosalind shot to her feet, unable to take it anymore, and questioned the assistant, "You're Mr. Vaughn, isn't he going to leave a single item for anyone else?" The assistant glanced nervously at Ethan, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "I apologize, Miss Ashwood," the assistant replied coldly. "These are all gifts from Mr. Vaughn to Miss Ivy. He only wishes for her to be happy at this auction. Other people's feelings are not his concern." Rosalind laughed, her nails digging deep into her palms. She looked at Ethan, but his gaze remained fixed on the triumphant Ivy. "Ethan Vaughn, you've really outdone yourself. You are truly something else." After the auction, Ivy was surrounded by a crowd of socialites and madams, all fawning over her like she was a star. Rosalind couldn't stand the hypocrisy and quickly left the venue. As soon as she got in the car, she told the driver, "To Noir Club." She needed alcohol to numb herself, but before the car door could close, Ivy squeezed in. "Sister, are you going to the club? I've been so bored lately, take me with you." Just as Rosalind was about to kick her out, Ethan silently held the door open and said directly to the driver, "Drive." On the way, Ivy chattered excitedly about the day's auction. "Ethan, why do you think Mr. Vaughn is so good to me? We've never even met." Ethan's voice was unbelievably gentle. "Because he likes you." Ivy's eyes widened, her cheeks flushing. "Ethan, don't joke around. A man knows a man," he said, his gaze fixed on Ivy. "Where his money goes, his heart goes. Besides, a girl as wonderful as you, it's no surprise he'd fall for you." "Then, do you like me too, Ethan?" Ivy asked suddenly. Ethan froze. Just as he was about to speak, Rosalind cut in coldly, "If you two want to flirt, get the hell out. This is my car." Ivy's eyes immediately reddened. "I'm sorry, sister. I didn't mean to disturb you." "I'll be quiet." Rosalind couldn't be bothered with her and turned to look out the window. In the reflection, she clearly saw Ethan looking at Ivy with a heart-wrenching tenderness, while his gaze towards her was cold and filled with disgust. She let out a self-mocking laugh. It seemed all men preferred the wolf in sheep's clothing. Chapter 4, the lights of the club were a hazy blur as Rosalind downed her third glass of whiskey. The alcohol burned her throat, but couldn't extinguish the smoldering frustration in her heart. In the middle of the dance floor, she moved in her stilettos, her red dress swirling. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Ethan standing by their booth. He was supposed to be her bodyguard, yet he hadn't left Ivy's side for a second. Ivy said something, leaning in so close her lips almost brushed against Ethan's earlobe. The man, who was always an iceberg to Rosalind now, had a faint blush on the tips of his ears. Rosalind sneered and turned, only to be surrounded by a group of playboys. "Miss Ashwood, care for a drink? Can I get your number?" "I've wanted to meet you for so long, Miss Ashwood. That face, you're even more beautiful in person." She was trapped in a corner, unable to move. Her rejections were useless. More men just crowded around, and someone even dared to touch her waist. "Ethan Vaughn," she finally snapped. It was as if he had only just noticed her predicament. He frowned and pushed through the crowd. The muscles in his suit-clad arms were well-defined, and a single glare was enough to make the group of delinquents retreat. "Anyone who didn't know better would think you were her bodyguard," Rosalind said coldly, wiping a drop of liquor from her collarbone. Ethan looked down. "I'm sorry, I didn't see." "You didn't see?" She suddenly leaned in, her red lips almost grazing his chin. Or you just didn't want to look. The sudden proximity of her scent made Ethan's Adam's apple bob. He took half a step back. You've had too much to drink, Miss Ashwood. Don't worry. Once I'm married off, you can protect Ivy Ashwood to your heart's content. Rosalind's voice was drowned out by a sudden wave of screams from the stage. Staff members wheeled out an iron cage, where 2 adult Tibetan mastiffs were pacing restlessly. Tonight's special event, the host shouted excitedly. Black Storm versus Red Flame, place your bets now, Rosalind frowned. Noir Club often featured these bloody fighting shows for betting, but she had always despised them. Just as she was about to leave, the cage let out a tortured creak. The lock had come loose. It all happened in an instant. The larger of the 2 mastiffs crashed through the cage door and lunged straight for the nearest crowd of people. Amid the screams, Rosalind saw Ethan turn without hesitation, instinctively rushing to Ivy's side, shielding her completely as he pushed her towards the emergency exit. And she was left standing closest to the mastiff, so close she could see the saliva dripping from its fangs. Ah, the pain was sudden and sharp. As the mastiff's teeth pierced the muscle in her calf, Rosalind vaguely heard the sound of fabric and flesh tearing together. A chunk of her flesh was brutally torn away, and blood spurted out. She collapsed to the ground, watching in horror as the beast lunged at her again. Bang, the gunshot was deafening. The mastiff fell to the ground. The last thing she saw was the back of Ethan Vaughn, holding a gun and shielding Ivy, and the ceiling spinning into darkness. The smell of disinfectant. When Rosalind regained consciousness in a wave of pain, the first thing she saw was the white ceiling. Her calf felt like it had been seared with a branding iron, every breath pulling at the wound. She turned her head with difficulty, and the scene at the door of her hospital room dealt another heavy blow to her barely conscious mind. Ivy Ashwood was buried in Ethan's arms, sobbing. Ethan, your sister's bodyguard, why did you protect me? It's all my fault, I shouldn't have come. The man's well-defined hand gently patted her back, his voice unbelievably soft. Don't blame yourself, Miss Ivy. Even if I had to do it 100 times over, he paused, his fingertips wiping away the tears on her face, I would still choose to protect you first. Why? Ivy looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. Ethan gazed at her, his deep eyes tinged with emotion. Because, Chapter 5, crashed. The sound of a water glass shattering on the floor cut off Ethan's unfinished sentence. Ivy jumped out of Ethan's arms like a startled rabbit. Sister, you're awake, she cried, rushing to the bedside, tears instantly welling up. How are you feeling? Does it still hurt? It's all my fault. A cold sneer formed on Rosalind's pale lips. With you in my sight, how could I possibly be well? Ivy's tears fell even faster, her shoulders trembling as if she had suffered a great injustice. She bit her lip, gave Ethan one last look, and ran out of the room. Ethan instinctively took a step to follow, but forced himself to stop. He turned to Rosalind, his voice low. Miss Ashwood, it was an emergency. I didn't have time to react. Rosalind didn't speak. She just turned her head to look out the window. She didn't want to hear it. For 3 whole days, Ethan stood guard outside her hospital room like a diligent bodyguard, and she never said another word to him. Until the day she was discharged. Rosalind, walking on her still healing leg, went straight to the study. She pulled open a mahogany drawer and took out a glistening black leather whip. It was an old Ashwood family heirloom, used for punishment. A single lash could break the skin. Have Ethan Vaughn come here, she told the butler. When Ethan pushed the door open, Rosalind was slowly, methodically wiping the whip. Sunlight streamed through the French windows, casting a shadow beneath her eyelashes. Ethan Vaughn, you are my bodyguard. You failed to protect your charge, she said, looking up at him. I'm going to punish you. Do you have any objections? Ethan stood his ground, his pupils constricting almost imperceptibly. Rosalind saw it clearly. The great prince of North City had probably never imagined that one day someone would dare to use the family whip on him. Indeed, he was the famous sole heir of the Vaughn family. Countless people fawned over him daily, who would dare to touch a single hair on his head. But now, she was going to whip him. Rosalind stared at his expression and suddenly smiled. He was hesitating. He could have turned and walked away, he could have resigned, but he was hesitating, all for Ivy Ashwood. To stay by her side, to continue getting close to Ivy. Her eyes burned and she almost laughed through her tears. Ethan clenched his jaw and finally said in a low voice, "None." In that moment, Rosalind's heart clenched violently. She gripped the whip and raised her arm. "Don't." A slender figure suddenly lunged forward, shielding Ethan. Ivy's eyes were filled with tears, her voice trembling. "Sister, if you're going to hit someone, hit me. It has nothing to do with Ethan. Move," Rosalind said coldly. "No," Ivy shook her head, crying piteously. "It was my fault you got hurt. If you want to punish someone, punish me." Ethan reached out to pull her away. "Miss Ivy, this doesn't concern you." But Ivy stubbornly stood in front of him, refusing to budge. Rosalind watched the scene, rage boiling inside her, and swung the whip with all her might. Crack! The whip cut through the air with a sharp, piercing sound. She had aimed for Ethan, but Ivy had thrown herself in the way, taking the full force of the blow for him. "Ah!" Ivy cried out in pain, her slender body swaying before she crumpled. Ethan caught her, checking her injury. When he looked up again, Rosalind met a pair of eyes that were utterly glacial. In them was murder. As if in the next second, he would leap forward and snap her neck. She froze, as if plunged into an icy abyss. "Get out," she heard her own trembling voice say. Ethan lifted the unconscious Ivy and turned to leave, the study door slamming shut behind him with a deafening crash. Rosalind stood there, realizing her hands were shaking too much to hold the whip. Chapter 6. 3 days later. Rosalind went to try on wedding dresses alone. Night had fallen. Just as she stepped out of the boutique, someone grabbed her from behind, a hand clamping over her mouth and nose. A pungent chemical smell filled her nostrils. She struggled for a moment before losing consciousness. When she woke up, she was in complete darkness. Her eyes were blindfolded and her hands were tied to a chair, rendering her immobile. Crack! The first lash struck, and Rosalind arched her back in agony. The rough rope bit deep into her wrists, and the blindfold made the darkness even thicker. She bit her lip until it bled to swallow her scream. "You've crossed someone you shouldn't have." The torturer's voice seemed to come from far away. Crack, crack, crack! The lashes fell like rain, each one carrying a sharp whistle as it tore through the air, flaying her skin. She bit her lip, refusing to scream. Who would do this to her? The whipping continued for a long time. It was only when her consciousness began to fade that it finally stopped. Then, she heard the sound of a phone being dialed. "Sir, the job you ordered is done," the man said respectfully. From the other end of the line came a familiar male voice. "Good, send her back." It was just one sentence, but the blood in Rosalind's veins instantly froze. It was Ethan Vaughn. Ethan Vaughn had ordered someone to beat her just because she had accidentally whipped Ivy once. He had repaid her with 99 lashes. Agony and a chilling cold swept through her body. She couldn't hold on any longer and fainted. At the hospital, Rosalind lay face down on the bed, the wounds on her back burning. Outside the door, the nurses were whispering, "That man is so handsome and so gentle with his girlfriend." "I know, right? It's just a tiny whip mark, and he's acting like it's the end of the world. Then look at the one in 304, covered in wounds, and no one's come to see her." Rosalind ripped out her IV drip and, leaning against the wall, shuffled down the hallway. Sure enough, at the door of the VIP ward, she saw Ethan. He was holding a glass of water, carefully helping Ivy take a sip. Ivy was murmuring something poutily, and Ethan used his thumb to wipe a drop of water from the corner of her mouth, his eyes filled with a tenderness that could melt glaciers. Rosalind leaned weakly against the wall, her eyes welling up. She didn't understand why, even though she had already decided to let go, her heart could still ache so much, as if someone was slowly carving out her flesh with a dull knife. "Don't cry, Rosalind," she told herself, "because no one will care." On the day she was discharged, she had just arrived home when familiar footsteps sounded behind her. Ethan was back. Their eyes met, and they both saw something different in each other's gaze. They stood in silence until Rosalind's phone vibrated. Her father's name flashed on the screen. "It's Ivy's birthday party tomorrow." Her father's voice was firm, leaving no room for refusal. "She's been crying to me lately, saying she wants to get along with you. You need to be there." Rosalind sneered. "I'm not going." "What's with the attitude? This might be the last time." Her father's tone hardened. "The Crestwood family has set the date. After you're married." She hung up and looked up at Ethan, who was standing in the shadows. "Do you think I should go?" The man's chiseled profile looked exceptionally cold under the wall lamp. He was silent for a few seconds before his low voice answered, "You should." Fine, she said, a bitter smile on her lips. Then I'll do as you wish. The birthday party was held in the glass conservatory of the old Ashwood estate. When Rosalind arrived in a dark green velvet gown, most of the guests were already there. Under the crystal chandelier, Ivy, in a pink ball gown, was being fawned over like a true princess. "Sister," Ivy greeted her with a look of pleasant surprise, moving to take her arm. Rosalind sidestepped her, her gaze sweeping over the room filled with gifts from their father, a limited edition Hermes bag, a Tiffany blue box, and the keys to a Porsche. "Ivy has always been so sensible. She's my favorite." Richard Ashwood stood beside Ivy, his face full of paternal love, just like many years ago when he used to stand beside her and her mother. She had been in a little white dress, held high by her father, while her mother smiled gently at her side. Now everything had changed. After the cake was cut, the guests dispersed into small groups. Ivy's best friend pulled her aside to gossip. "Ivy, so many eligible bachelors from our circle are here tonight. Do you think Mr. Ashwood is trying to set you up? But I heard you were already engaged to the Crestwood family." Ivy smiled, glancing meaningfully at Rosalind from a distance. "That's long been called off. Oh, that's good. I heard that Guy is in a coma. Marrying him would be like being a widow, right?" her friend said, winking. "Ivy, with so many men here tonight, tell us, what are your standards for a husband?" Urged on by the crowd, Ivy blushed and counted on her fingers. "First, he has to love me completely, the kind who would tattoo my name over his heart. Second, he has to be brave. I heard there's a rare, thorned rose on Moonview Cliff. He'd have to pick it for me. Third," before she could finish, the doors to the banquet hall were suddenly pushed open. "Mr. Vaughn has arrived with a gift to wish Miss Ashwood a happy birthday and a lifetime of joy and peace." Chapter 7, an assistant led a procession of people in, each carrying a priceless gift, a rare pink diamond necklace, antique paintings, and even the deed to a private island. The entire hall was in an uproar. This is from Mr. Vaughn? I heard that Mr. Vaughn's representative bought out the auction for Miss Ivy, and now he's here in person with gifts. It seems Miss Ivy is about to ascend to new heights. The whispers and discussions were everywhere. Many people glanced at Rosalind with pity. She was clearly more beautiful, with a more legitimate background, but now everyone felt she had lost. Rosalind put down her wine glass and walked out onto the terrace. The night breeze was cool. She had just taken a deep breath when Ivy's voice came from behind her. "Sister, why are you out here all alone?" With no guests and no father around, Ivy finally dropped her mask. "Did you know? Dad told me you're going to marry that man in a coma," she said with a sweet, venomous smile. "How pathetic. Your mother couldn't win against my mother, and now you can't win against me." Rosalind spun around. "What did you just say?" "I said," Ivy leaned in, her red lips spitting out words like a viper, "your mother deserved to die in childbirth." A crisp slapping sound echoed through the air. But it wasn't Rosalind who had struck the blow. Ivy had slapped herself the next second, tears streamed down her face as she staggered back a few steps, falling right into the arms of Ethan, who had just rushed over. "It's not Sister's fault," Ivy sobbed, clutching her cheek. "It was me, I made her angry." The next moment, her father and the guests arrived, their condemning glares shooting towards Rosalind like arrows. "Rosalind Ashwood," her father roared. "Have you no manners?" The guests' whispers were like daggers. "How vicious, and on Miss Ivy's birthday." "Well, her mother died young. She was raised without a mother's guidance. That's why she's so petty." Rosalind looked at the carefully orchestrated drama and suddenly laughed. She strode forward and, in front of everyone, slapped Ivy hard across the face. "Look closely," she said, smashing her champagne flute. The glass shards reflected countless astonished faces. "That one was from me?" As she turned to leave, she saw Ethan holding Ivy's shoulders, his eyes as cold as ice. In the garden path, Rosalind had just rounded a corner when her wrist was seized in a brutal grip. Ethan's strength was shocking. She felt as if her bones were about to be crushed. "Miss Ashwood," he said, his voice low and seething with suppressed anger. "What?" She looked up at him mockingly. "I slapped her once. Are you going to give me 99 in return?" Ethan's pupils constricted. What did she mean by that? Could it be that she knew about last time? Impossible. He had been discreet. "Miss Ashwood," he loosened his grip slightly, his brow furrowed. "You have everything. Why do you still have to bully Miss Ivy?" "I have everything." Rosalind burst out laughing, a laugh so hoarse it sounded like a sob. "What do I have?" The moment she arrived, my mother was so distraught she died in childbirth, taking my sibling with her when she moved in. She took my room, my toys, my allowance, my father, even my spot at the university abroad, my everything. This was the first time Ethan had ever heard her say so much. Under the moonlight, Rosalt's eyes, usually filled with sarcasm, were brimming with tears she stubbornly refused to let fall. "I heard," Ethan's voice was hard, "that Miss Ivy was the one who had a difficult life." Rosalind violently shook him off and turned to leave. "Believe what you want." Just before she got into the car, Ethan spoke again. "Miss Ashwood, I'd like to request a few days off." "As you wish," she said, closing the car door without looking back. After the black sedan had driven some distance, she suddenly told the driver, "Turn around." Returning to the vicinity of the Ashwood estate, she saw Ethan getting into a Rolls-Royce, just as she'd expected. Rosalind had her driver follow from a distance, eventually stopping outside a high-end tattoo parlor. Through the glass window, she saw Ethan unbutton his shirt, revealing a well-muscled chest. The tattoo artist asked him something, and he pointed to his heart, mouthing 2 syllables from the shape of his lips. It was clearly Ivy. Chapter 8. The assistant tried to dissuade him. "Mr. Vaughn, your grandfather will be furious if he finds out." "Do it," he said, just one word. The buzz of the tattoo gun was like a drill boring holes into Rosalind's heart. 2 hours later, Ethan emerged, clutching his bleeding chest. His face pale but a determined look on his face as he got into the car. "To Moonview Cliff," he told the driver. "No, that place is too dangerous, and you just got a tattoo, go now." Sitting in her car, Rosalind suddenly remembered Ivy's criteria for a husband. The kind who would tattoo my name over his heart. "There's a flower on Moonview Cliff, he has to pick it for me." She laughed, and as she laughed, tears started to fall. "Let's go," she told her driver. "We're not following anymore." That night, she scrolled through Ivy's Instagram feed. A photo of a thorned rose blooming on a cliff, with the caption, "Someone crossed mountains and valleys just to pick a flower for me." At 3 in the morning, Ethan returned. He was covered in blood, his right arm broken, but the corners of his lips were turned up in a slight, satisfied smile. The next day, just as Rosalind was about to leave, Ethan came out of his room. His face was pale, his right arm was in a sling, and his shirt collar was slightly open. "Miss Ashwood," his voice was a bit hoarse. "I was in a small car accident last night. I'll need to rest for a few more days, so I can't protect you for the time being." A car accident? More like he fell while climbing a cliff. But she didn't expose his lie, just gave a faint, and walked out. Today was the day she was saying goodbye to her friends. A high-class club, VIP room. "Come on, let's drink till we drop tonight," her best friend, Chloe Dyer, threw an arm around Rosalind's shoulder. "Our Miss Ashwood is about to become Mrs. Crestwood, we have to celebrate." The room was filled with her closest friends from over the years. A champagne tower sparkled under the lights, and the music was deafening, but to Rosalind, it felt strangely quiet. "If you ask me, having a husband in a coma is the best," Chloe slurred, swaying her wine glass. "Rich, handsome, and you don't have to wait on him. It's the ideal marriage, exactly," another friend agreed. "And with the Crestwood family's massive fortune, it'll all be yours one day," Rosalind smiled faintly, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "Once I'm married, I'll have to settle down. I have to maintain some dignity for the Crestwood family." Everyone paused, then quickly changed their tune. "Mr. Crestwood will definitely wake up. You're so beautiful. How could he bear to stay asleep?" "Exactly, our Leary is the #1 beauty in our circle. There's no way she'll be a widow." Rosalind listened to their nonsense, with a smile, drinking glass after glass. When it was time to say goodbye, Chloe suddenly hugged her, her voice choked with emotion. "Your dad is a real piece of work, and that Ivy Ashwood, do you want us to teach her a lesson for you?" "No need," Rosalind patted her back. "Once I'm gone, none of this will have anything to do with me anymore." She hugged each of them until everyone's eyes were red. After paying the bill, as Rosalind passed the room next door, she heard familiar voices. "Is that flower really so hard to get? You have no idea Moonview Cliff is a place even professional climbing teams don't dare to go lightly." Through the slightly ajar door, Rosalind saw Ivy playing with the thorned rose while her friend gossiped, "But he still risked his life to get it for you." When he delivered it yesterday, I think I even saw your name tattooed over his heart. Is he really trying to win you over? Just a bodyguard. Does he think he's worthy? I'm the one the prince of the Vaughn family has his eye on now, she said, stroking the rose's tattered petals. But Ethan is certainly handsome. It wouldn't be a loss to keep him as a lover on the side. Chapter 9. Her friend's eyes widened. Aren't you afraid he'll hear you? So what if he does? Ivy said nonchalantly. Men are simple. Give them a little sweetness, and they'll be devoted to you forever. Standing in the shadows of the corner, Rosalind suddenly wondered what Ethan's expression would be if he heard that. The high and mighty Mr. Vaughn, what would his reaction be if he knew he was just a backup plan? Ethan Vaughn, this is the person you're willing to die for. She gave a sarcastic smile and turned to leave, not disturbing the people inside. After leaving the club, she went straight to the cemetery. Rosalind knelt before her mother's grave, gently wiping the dust from her photograph. Mom, I'm getting married. To the Crestwood family's man in a coma, it's for the best. At least he won't cheat. The wind rustled the white chrysanthemums in front of the tombstone like a silent response. Don't worry, I won't be like you, she said, her fingertips tracing the cold stone. Loving someone so much you'd give up your life for them, that's just foolish. I'm going to live this life well, very, very well. As the sky darkened, Rosalind stood up, took one last look at her mother's photo, and turned to leave. Back home, Rosalind spent the entire night packing. Clothes, jewelry, photo albums, she sorted through them one by one, preparing to never return. As dawn broke, her phone vibrated. Account credit, 10 billion. Immediately after, a call from her father came through. The Crestwood family is pressing. You have to leave today. I've given you the 10 billion. As for Ethan Vaughn, I'll have him go to the Ashwood estate. Rosalind cut him off. From today on, he's Ivy Ashwood's bodyguard. I don't want him anymore. There was a moment of silence on the other end, then her father's tone suddenly softened. Rosalind, I've actually always loved you and your mother very much. I used to think you were just morally bankrupt. Rosalind laughed. Now I realize you're truly disgusting. She hung up and blocked his number. Outside, the moving company's truck had arrived. As Rosalind was directing the workers, Ethan came out of his room. Miss Ashwood, what's all this? He asked, frowning at the boxes everywhere. Moving, Rosalind said without looking up. To a new place. Ethan nodded, seemingly not thinking much of it, certainly not imagining that the new place she spoke of was in South City, not North City. I'll help you. No need, she finally looked at him. You have another task. What is it? Go buy a bag of roasted chestnuts now and deliver it to the Ashwood estate for Ivy. Ethan was clearly taken aback. Why? You'll know when you get there. She saw his Adam's apple bob, a flicker of emotion in his usually cold eyes. But in the end, the desire to see Ivy won out over his suspicion. Ethan then remembered something else. Miss Ashwood, send me your new address. I'll pack my things and head over later. A 24-hour personal bodyguard required to live with her and ensure her safety at all times. That was in their contract. But this time, Rosalind didn't answer. He waited a moment, and seeing she had no intention of responding, he figured she might send it later and turned to leave. As he reached the main gate, he thought he heard her say something. What? He turned back. Rosalind stood in the morning light and said softly, Nothing, go on. Once his figure had completely disappeared, Rosalind got into her car and told the driver, the airport. The scenery outside the window flew by. She took out her phone, removed the SIM card, and with a gentle bend snap. The card broke in two. She casually tossed it out the window, and it vanished completely. Chapter 10. Ethan Vaughn stood before the ornate iron gate of the Ashwood estate, a bag of freshly roasted chestnuts in his hand. The paper bag was slightly soft from the steam, and a sweet, nutty aroma filled the air. He pressed a hand to his chest, where Ivy's name was tattooed over his heart. The needle marks hadn't fully healed and ached faintly. But what was stranger was the frantic pounding of his heart, as if something was tearing at his nerves, making it impossible for him to be calm. He frowned, attributing the strange feeling to the excitement of seeing Ivy soon. As he pushed the door open, Richard Ashwood was standing in the middle of the living room, trying to reason with someone, while Ivy stood with her back to him, her shoulders trembling slightly, her voice laced with anger. 10 billion? Dad, are you insane? Richard lowered his voice. As long as there's life, there's hope, my dear daughter. I had no choice. I can't go back on my word with the Crestwood family. I had to choose one of my daughters to marry him, and I didn't want you to get caught up in this mess, so I chose Rosalind. But this was her condition for agreeing. Think about it. Do you want to marry him, or do you want the 10 billion? Ivy bit her lip, finally speaking with reluctance. Of course I don't want to marry him, he's in a coma. Marrying him would be like being a widow. Besides, the prince of the Vaughn family has his eye on me now. Halfway through her sentence, she caught sight of Ethan out of the corner of her eye, and her expression changed instantly. When she turned, she was wearing a sweet smile. Ethan, you're here? Ethan hadn't heard their previous conversation. He just gave a gentle muh and handed her the chestnuts. Eat them while they're hot. Ivy took the bag, her fingertips deliberately brushing against his palm, her eyes curving into crescents as she smiled. They're still warm. Ethan looked at her, a faint smile on his lips. I'm glad you like them, Miss Ivy. He should have been happy, but for some reason, the strange feeling in his heart intensified, as if something was quietly spiraling out of control. He paused. I've made the delivery. I should go now. Ivy quickly grabbed his sleeve. You don't have to go. Ethan was taken aback. What do you mean? Ivy blinked, feigning innocence. Didn't sister tell you? She's already given you to me. Ethan's mind went blank. What did she mean, given? Seeing his strange expression, Ivy immediately added fuel to the fire. For that $10 billion, sister has already agreed to marry that man in a coma from the Crestwood family. She moved out early this morning to go to South City. From now on, you're my bodyguard. Ethan's breath hitched, getting married. To Julian Crestwood, the man who was once his peer, the heir to the Crestwood family, now lying in a hospital bed in a vegetative state. He suddenly remembered Rosalind's moving this morning. It wasn't just a simple move. It was marrying and moving to South City. His mind was flooded with an uncontrollable image of the first time he saw Rosalind 3 years ago. At the bodyguard selection for the Ashwood family, he had gone because he was interested in the second daughter, Ivy. He never expected that the one doing the selecting was the eldest daughter, Rosalind. He had intended to leave immediately but was chosen on the spot. The sun was bright that day. She descended the spiral staircase in a red slip dress, the crisp sound of her high heels on the marble floor like a piece of music. I'll take him, she had said, pointing at him, a smile on her red lips. He's good-looking. He later learned that this Miss Ashwood was the infamous vixen of their circle, changing boyfriends more often than she changed clothes. Passionate, flamboyant, like an unquenchable fire. On a whim, he had stayed, telling himself it was a way to get closer to Ivy. After all, they were sisters. Later, she repeatedly tried to seduce him, but her methods were adorably clumsy, faking a sprained ankle to fall into his arms, but spraying so much perfume she started sneezing. Knocking on his door late at night in a sexy nightgown, but being so nervous she fumbled her words. Even pretending to drown in the pool, only for him to discover when he jumped in to save her that she couldn't swim at all and had nearly drowned herself for real. Ethan's Adam's apple bobbed. A person as proud as her, would she really marry for $10 billion? And marry a man in a coma? A sharp pain shot through Ethan's heart, as if it had been pierced by something sharp. Seeing him lost in thought, Ivy tugged at his sleeve plaintively. Ethan, don't you want to stay by my side and protect me? Ethan snapped back to reality, suppressing the turmoil in his heart. No, he said in a low voice. He heard himself say, it is my honor to be able to protect Miss Ivy. But why, as he said those words, was his mind filled with the last look Rosalind had given him? Calm, indifferent, as if she were looking at a stranger. Wonderful, Ivy cheered, affectionately linking her arm with his. Then, let's go shopping right now. I want to buy a new dress. Ethan mechanically followed her out. This was what he had always wanted, wasn't it? To be able to openly protect Ivy, without having to use the identity of Rosalind's bodyguard to watch her from afar. As for Rosalind, she had bullied Ivy since they were children. It was good that she was gone. At least now, no one would hurt Ivy anymore. Chapter 11, Ethan's devotion to Ivy was almost outrageously excessive. As her bodyguard, he accompanied her shopping, to dinner, and to the movies. If she casually mentioned wanting a pastry from an old bakery across town, he would go and wait in line at 3 in the morning. If she got tired from shopping, he would crouch down and massage her ankles, completely ignoring the stunned looks from passers-by. As the prince of the Vaughn family, if Ivy liked a new piece from a high-end jewelry line, he would secretly have someone buy the entire collection and have it delivered to her. If she said she liked the stars, he would buy a patent to name a section of the sky after her. If she said she didn't like someone, that person would vanish from their social circle the next day. All his friends said that the prince of the Vaughn family had fallen, and fallen hard for the second Miss Ashwood. And they weren't wrong. One day, Ivy insisted on going to the countryside to watch the sunset. On their way back, a truck lost control and hurtled straight towards their car. In that split second, Ethan yanked the steering wheel, swerving the passenger side away from the point of impact, and then threw his body over Ivy to shield her. Crash, the car was thrown into a roll, glass shattered, and the airbags deployed. Ethan's back slammed hard against the car door, and a sharp piece of metal pierced his flesh, instantly soaking his shirt with blood. But his arms remained firmly around the woman in his embrace, ensuring she didn't suffer a single scratch. Ivy's face was pale with terror. She trembled as she reached for his blood-covered face. You're bleeding," Ethan tried to comfort her, but the moment he opened his mouth, he coughed up blood. The last thing he heard before he passed out was her desperate cries. When he woke up, the first thing he saw was the stark white ceiling of a hospital room. Ivy was dozing by his bedside. The moment she heard him stir, she threw her arms around him. "You scared me to death, why were you so foolish?" She accidentally pressed on his wound. A sharp pain made Ethan grunt, but he still raised a hand to stroke her back. "It's nothing, it doesn't hurt." Ivy was crying her eyes out. "The doctor said a piece of metal pierced you, another inch and it would have hit your heart." He was still gentle. "Don't cry, it's what I'm supposed to do." "You're too good to me." Ivy looked up, her eyes wet with tears. "You were supposed to be my sister's bodyguard, but you were always secretly taking care of me all these years. I remember that time I had a fever, and you ran all over the city in the rain to buy me red bean cakes." That day, the rain had been torrential. He had searched for 5 hours and returned soaked to the bone, but he still delivered the warm red bean cakes to the Ashwood estate. "And last year on my birthday, I just casually mentioned wanting a necklace that wasn't for sale, and you went and competed in a life or death street race. But what moved me the most was that flower from Moonview Cliff, such a dangerous place, and you risked your life to pick it for me." "So?" Ivy looked at him expectantly. "Why are you so good to me?" "Because," he opened his mouth, but the words "I like you" got stuck in his throat. It was so strange. He had shielded her from a car crash, picked a flower for her, even gotten a tattoo for her, but when it came time to actually say the words, his heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand, the pain making it hard to breathe. "Are you free in 3 days?" He finally changed the subject. "There's something I want to tell you." Ivy's eyes lit up. "What is it?" "You'll know when the time comes," he said with a forced smile. Ivy wanted to ask more, but her phone suddenly rang. She glanced at the caller ID, and her expression immediately became flustered. "Ethan, something's come up, I have to go." Before Ethan could respond, she had grabbed her bag and rushed out of the room. The moment the door closed, the smile vanished from Ethan's face. He stared at the ceiling, and suddenly remembered an incident from 6 months ago. He was still Rosalind's bodyguard back then. During a business event, they were attacked. He had taken a deep gash to his shoulder, a wound that went down to the bone to protect her. "Ethan Vaughn, are you fucking insane?" Rosalind had exploded on the spot, her eyes red as she screamed at him. "Who told you to block it? Who told you to block it?" She had cursed at him while frantically trying to stop the bleeding, completely oblivious to the fact that her expensive gown was being stained with blood. Later, at the hospital, this pampered young lady who had never lifted a finger insisted on taking care of him personally. The porridge she cooked was so thick it could have been used as a brick, and when she peeled an apple, she shaved off half the fruit, but she stubbornly refused to let a nurse help. "You're my bodyguard, that's true," she had said, her eyes red, "but my life is important and so is yours." As he recalled this, a smile unconsciously formed on Ethan's lips. The next second he froze. What am I doing? Rosalind was already married. He was in love with Ivy. What was the point of thinking about all this? As if to prove something to himself, he grabbed his phone and called his childhood friend, Leo Grant. Well, if it isn't Mr. Vaughn, finally remembering his friends. A teasing voice came from the other end. "I heard you took a hit for love, almost became a martyr." Ethan cut straight to the chase. Help me prepare a confession. What? Leo nearly fell out of his chair. You're going to confess to Ivy Ashwood? Finally done with the secret crush thing? Yeah, Ethan said, rattling off a list of requirements. I want a rose garden, a symphony orchestra, a drone show, and get me a pink diamond necklace. Leo's jaw dropped. You're spending $100 million on a confession? What are you going to do next? Give her the world? I really don't get it. What's so special about Ivy Ashwood that makes her worth all this? The question sent Ethan back in time. 3 years ago, at that charity gala, he had seen Ivy for the first time. She was wearing a white dress, climbing a tree without a care in the world to save a teetering bird's nest. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, dappling her form. He couldn't see her face clearly, but the image was as beautiful as a painting. He had to take a call, and by the time he came back to help her, she had already saved the nest and left. He asked a waiter who she was, and the waiter replied, "The young lady of the Ashwood family." It was that single moment of enchantment that made him decide to get close to her. He even hid his identity and became Rosalind's bodyguard, just so he could see Ivy more often. She's kind, innocent. Ethan listed Ivy's virtues mechanically, but the more he spoke, the more foreign she seemed. Anyway, just get it ready. This time, I will make sure Ivy says yes. With that, he hung up. Chapter 12, Ethan's wound had not yet healed, and the doctor had repeatedly warned him to rest, but he insisted on being discharged early. He spent over $100 million setting up a grand confession at the most luxurious rose manor in North City. The manor was carpeted with Juliet roses flown in from France, each one hand-picked by him. The music played by the orchestra was a selection he had spent 3 sleepless nights personally curating. The fireworks were even custom designed in the shape of a starry sky, set to spell out Ivy's name at the most romantic moment. He even personally tasted all the dishes and was meticulous about the vintage of the champagne. His friend Leo Grant saw his dedication and couldn't help but tease, "Mr. Vaughn, anyone who didn't know better would think you were preparing for a coronation." Ethan ignored him, glancing at his watch. It was half an hour until their agreed time. However, half an hour passed, then an hour. Ivy never showed up. Ethan stood on the rose-strewn terrace, his fingers unconsciously stroking the diamond ring in his pocket. He had called Ivy countless times, but every call went to voicemail. Could something have happened? He frowned, immediately contacting his men. Find out Ivy Ashwood's itinerary for today. 10 minutes later, the message came back. Miss Ivy Ashwood is at the Rhine Beauty Salon. She has had a full body spa treatment, a manicure, and an appointment with a hairstylist. She has been there for 6 hours. Ethan froze. She was at a beauty salon. Had she forgotten the time? But he had specifically reminded her just yesterday. He gripped his phone and drove there immediately. The Rhine Beauty Salon was an exclusive VIP establishment. The security guard at the door tried to stop him. "Sir, please show your membership." "Get out of the way," the manager rushed over, slapping the guard's hand away. "Are you blind?" "This is Mr. Vaughn." Ethan stormed towards the top-floor suite, his face grim. But just before he pushed the door open, he heard laughter from inside. "Are you really not going to meet your bodyguard?" A friend's voice teased. Ivy let out a lazy laugh. "Why would I? I can tell from the look in his eyes he's going to confess, as if I would ever marry a bodyguard." "But he's so good to you," her friend teased. "He took a hit for you, picked that flower for you, even got your name tattooed over his heart." "So what?" Ivy scoffed. "No matter how handsome he is or how well he treats me, he's still just a gatekeeper. I'm the one the prince of the Vaughn family has his eye on now. Of course, I'm going to seize the chance to marry into a wealthy family." Ethan's hand froze on the doorknob. Her friend asked again, "Then why don't you just reject him? Stringing him along is so cruel." "What do you know?" Ivy's voice was smug. "He's handsome, he can fight, and he's willing to risk his life for me. What's wrong with having one more devoted fool? Most importantly." She suddenly lowered her voice, her laugh turning vicious. "Rosalind Ashwood likes him, but he likes me. Just thinking about the look on her face when her precious toy is snatched away makes me feel ecstatic. It's just like when she used to love wearing white dresses. I just had to say I liked them, and Dad gave all her white dresses to me. I wore them in front of her every day until she couldn't stand the sight of white anymore." Ethan felt as if he'd been struck by lightning. Her friend seemed intrigued. Speaking of which, you've really done a number on Rosalind over the years, haven't you? I heard about her mother's difficult childbirth. That woman deserved it. Ivy's tone suddenly sharpened. Who told her to cling to the title of Mrs. Ashwood? I just deliberately put a little something to induce a miscarriage in her water right before she was due to give birth. Who knew she'd be so fragile and just die, taking the baby with her? Oh, and Rosalind's university admission being cancelled. That was because you reported her for academic fraud, right? Just a forged letter of accusation, Ivy said dismissively. That idiot threw a huge tantrum at home when she found out, but it was useless. Dad only ever takes my side. Every word was a poison knife, stabbing the image of the innocent girl who had saved a bird's nest until it was unrecognizable. The manager asked timidly, "Mr. Vaughn, should we go in?" The room suddenly fell silent for a moment, then Ivy's wary voice came through. "Who's out there?" Ethan closed his eyes and turned to leave. "Don't tell her I was here." In the black Maybach, Ethan chain smoked, one cigarette after another. He thought about what Ivy had just said. She looked down on him, this gatekeeper, and only wanted to marry into a wealthy family. She had drugged Rosalind's mother, who was 10 months pregnant, causing her to die along with her unborn child. She had framed Rosalind for academic fraud, causing her to lose her chance to study abroad. Through the haze of smoke, he remembered Rosalind's eyes, always filled with sarcasm. The way she had gritted her teeth when she called him a fool, the way her fingers trembled as she bandaged his wound, the way she had slammed the door, saying, "Ethan Vaughn, I don't want you anymore." It turned out that all these years, the person he had cherished in his heart was so despicable. And Rosalind, whom he had treated with such coldness time and time again, she was the real victim. The cigarette burned his fingertips, but he didn't feel it. In the distance, the fireworks at the Rose Manor went off on schedule, exploding into a brilliant display of the name Ivy Ashwood. But the man who was supposed to be gazing up at them was now just chain smoking, his heart aching. He didn't know how the kind young girl he remembered could have turned into such a monstrous person. Thump, his fist slammed into the steering wheel. He finally understood. He had been in love with a ghost. The girl who saved the bird's nest had never existed, or rather, that person had never been Ivy Ashwood. His memory suddenly flashed back to the charity gala 3 years ago. Sunlight, a white dress, the girl in the tree, wait. Ivy's words suddenly echoed in his mind. It's just like when she used to love wearing white dresses. I just had to say I like them, and Dad gave all her white dresses to me. I wore them in front of her every day until she couldn't stand the sight of white anymore. He had asked the waiter who the girl was. The waiter had only said, "The young lady of the Ashwood family." Later, after he finished his business abroad and finally had time to find her, he learned that there were 2 Ashwood daughters. One was wild and rebellious, the vixen of their circle who loved to wear red. The other was pure as a jasmine, who loved to wear white. He had subconsciously assumed that the young lady of the Ashwood family meant the second daughter. But now, the blood in Ethan's veins turned to ice. He trembled as he dialed Leo Grant's number. "Get me the security footage from the garden of the charity gala 3 years ago." Chapter 13, he knew that 3 years had passed, and finding the footage would take time. But as the minutes ticked by, his heart pounded with an unbearable anxiety. He stared at his phone screen, not even blinking, the ashtray beside him overflowing with cigarette butts. His phone suddenly vibrated. He answered almost instantly. "Did you find it?" But the voice on the other end was the respectful tone of his butler. "Young master, Mr. Von SR, has requested your immediate presence at the main house." Ethan frowned. "Is grandfather not well?" He didn't say, but he sounded very urgent. He hung up and started the engine. The Vaughn family's main house was ablaze with lights. The moment Ethan stepped into the living room, a stack of photos was thrown at him, scattering across the floor. "Look at the kind of trash you've been chasing all these years," Arthur Von SR slammed his cane on the floor, his face livid. The heir to the Vaughn family, playing bodyguard for a woman like this. Ethan bent down to pick up the photos, his pupils constricting in the pictures. Ivy Ashwood was dressed in revealing skirts. Cozying up to different men, some were wealthy businessmen in their 50s, others were notorious playboys. The most glaring photo was of her standing on her toes to kiss the cheek of a married business tycoon, her eyes full of calculation. "You thought she was some pure, untouched lily," his grandfather sneered. The Ashwood family's wealth, doesn't even get them through the door of high society, that woman will do anything to climb the social ladder. Ethan's knuckles turned white as he gripped the photos. He suddenly remembered the things he had overheard at the beauty salon today. He had thought that was the worst of it, but she had managed to surprise him yet again. "Grandfather, before he could speak, the butler hurried in. "Young master, Miss Ivy Ashwood has sent an invitation. She says tomorrow is your birthday, and she would like to present a gift in person." Ethan froze. Tomorrow was his birthday. He had originally planned to announce Ivy's status to everyone at his birthday party after his successful confession, to tell everyone that she was the one for him. But now, his grandfather slammed his hand on the table. "Absolutely not. Let her come," Ethan said suddenly, his voice as cold as ice. "And while you're at it, invite Mr. Ashwood as well." As the butler was about to leave, Ethan stopped him again. "I want a full report on how Rosalind Ashwood has been treated in the Ashwood family over the years." His grandfather narrowed his eyes. "What are you planning now?" "There are some things I need to confirm," Ethan said, looking up, a storm brewing in his eyes. "Grandfather, give me one more day. I will give you a satisfactory answer." His grandfather snorted and, leaning on his cane, said before leaving, "Remember, the Vaughn family will never allow a woman like that through its doors." Night fell. Ethan stood in his study, looking at the thick file the butler had brought him. The manila envelope was light, yet it felt as heavy as lead. He took a deep breath and untied the string. With every page he turned, it felt like a knife twisting in his heart. The first page was Rosalind's medical record from when she was 7, stress-induced mutism, lasting 3 months. Next to it was a note from her psychologist. Patient witnessed her mother's death during childbirth and suffered severe trauma. Her father brought his illegitimate daughter home on the same day, leading to a strong rejection response from the patient. The paper trembled in his fingers. He turned the page. It was the year Ivy transferred to the prestigious elementary school. Richard Ashwood had bought Ivy a custom-made school bag worth $100,000, while Rosalind carried a faded old bag her mother had bought for her. At 12, Ivy had a birthday banquet with 30 tables. Rosalind was locked in the attic. At 15, Rosalind was accepted into a top high school. Her father refused to pay the tuition, saying it's useless for girls to study so much. Her maternal grandfather had secretly paid for it. At 18, her father gave the study abroad opportunity that was meant for Rosalind to Ivy. The last page was a diagnostic report from when Rosalind was 20, moderate depression with self-harm tendencies. Ethan slammed the file shut, the pain in his chest so intense he could barely breathe. He suddenly remembered Rosalind's hysterical outburst at Ivy's birthday party. At the time, he had dismissed it as her being unreasonable. He had even had her whipped 99 times because Ivy had gotten a single lash just moments ago. He had been desperate to get the security footage, to know who the person who had captured his heart really was. But now, he was suddenly afraid to know the answer if the person who saved the bird's nest 3 years ago wasn't Ivy at all, if that person was Rosalind. If she was the girl he had fallen for at first sight, then what had he done to her? He didn't dare to think any further. Chapter 14, the birthday banquet for the Prince of the Vaughn family, was staggeringly opulent. The entire estate was transformed into a medieval palace, with crystal chandeliers casting brilliant light, waiters weaving through the crowd with trays of champagne, and an orchestra playing elegant classical music. Nearly every prominent figure in North City was present, all eager to catch a glimpse of the legendary, mysterious heir. Ethan stood on the second-floor balcony, a cigarette between his fingers, his gaze fixed on the estate entrance. When Leo Grant appeared, looking travel-worn, at a side door of the banquet hall, Ethan practically flew down the stairs. "You better brace yourself," Leo said, his voice hesitant as he handed over a tablet. The security footage was somewhat blurry, but the scene from the charity gala's garden 3 years ago was still clear in a corner of the garden. A girl in a white dress stood on her toes, carefully placing a teetering bird's nest back onto a branch. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, dappling her form, making her look like an angel who had wandered into the mortal world. Ethan held his breath. In the final minute of the video, the girl finally turned around. The sunlight cast a golden halo around her. Strands of hair, damp with sweat, clung to her fair cheeks. Different from her current vibrant and flamboyant appearance, she looked as pure as a clear spring back then. That face, so bright and bold, with a beauty mark at the corner of her eye, was unmistakably Rosalind Ashwood. The phone hit the floor with a heavy sound. Ethan stared at the screen, his heart feeling as if it were being crushed by an invisible hand. He had been wrong from the very beginning. Meanwhile, at the estate entrance, Ivy Ashwood, arm in arm with her father, made a grand entrance, surrounded by her fawning friends. "My goodness, this is incredible," one friend exclaimed dramatically. "As expected of the prince of the Vaughn family, of course," another friend flattered. "Why else would he buy out the auction for Ivy? And give such extravagant birthday gifts?" Ivy lifted her chin proudly, basking in the praise. Richard Ashwood was even more flushed with success, surrounded by a crowd of business tycoons lavishing him with compliments. The Ashwood family was, at best, new money in North City. When had they ever received such treatment? He smugly hinted, "You guessed right. The prince of the Vaughn family has indeed taken a special liking to Ivy lately. Perhaps he'll be announcing some good news tonight." Announcing the arrival of Mr. Vaughn, the butler's booming voice silenced the entire hall. All eyes turned to the spiral staircase. Ethan descended slowly in a black, custom-tailored suit. The impeccably cut fabric hugged his broad shoulders and narrow waist, and a diamond pin on his collar glinted under the lights. His features were sharp as a knife, his jawline taut, and he exuded an aura of authority that made every step feel as if it were landing on the hearts of the guests. Ivy's eyes widened in disbelief. "Ethan, how can it be you?" her friends finally realized. "Ethan Vaughn is the prince of the Vaughn family, so Ivy, your bodyguard, was the prince himself." The shock on Ivy's face gradually turned into ecstatic joy. So that was it, the Ethan Vaughn who had been by her side, guarding her, was the prince of the Vaughn family. No wonder he had bought out the auction for her. No wonder he had given her those priceless gifts. She trembled with excitement, already envisioning her glorious future as the young mistress of the Vaughn family. Richard Ashwood was overjoyed, quickly pulling his daughter forward. "Mr. Vaughn, to think it was you. Why didn't you tell us you were experiencing life by being a bodyguard at our home? It's all my fault. I've been neglectful these past years. Please don't hold it against me." Ethan gave them a cold glance and raised a hand to silence the orchestra. "Thank you all for coming." His voice was not loud, but it commanded silence. "I'm taking the opportunity of my birthday to make an announcement." Ivy's heart pounded, a blush spreading across her cheeks. "As you all know, I have recently shown a particular fondness for the second daughter of the Ashwood family." Ethan paused, a sarcastic curve to his lips. "And the reason I've done so is to select a wife for my great-uncle." Chapter 15, the entire hall erupted in an uproar. The smile on Ivy's face froze. Her voice trembled. What great-uncle? Ethan, what are you talking about?" An old man with white hair, leaning on a cane, was helped forward by the butler. He looked at Ivy with a wide smile. "So this is my future wife? Not bad at all." "This is my grandfather's cousin," Ethan introduced coolly. "He's been a widower for many years and has been looking to remarry." Ivy stumbled backward. "Impossible, Ethan. This joke isn't funny at all. Ethan Vaughn, you must be joking, right? He's old enough to be my grandfather. Who gave you permission to address the young master by his name?" A bodyguard slapped her across the face, and half of Ivy's face instantly swelled up. Richard Ashwood finally snapped out of his shock and hurried forward. "Mr. Vaughn, there must be some misunderstanding. You were clearly so fond of Ivy." "Mr. Ashwood," Ethan cut him off, his voice like ice. "My great-uncle is very fond of your daughter. If you agree to this marriage, the Vaughn Corporation is willing to enter into a long-term partnership with the Ashwood Group." Richard's expression changed instantly. A long-term partnership. With the Vaughn family, it was an opportunity that could elevate the Ashwood Group to the top tier of society. "Dad," Ivy grabbed her father's arm in terror. "You wouldn't agree, would you?" "I'm only in my early 20s. Richard hesitated for a moment, then violently shook her off. "It is your good fortune to marry into the Vaughn family." He pushed her away and looked at Ethan with a fawning expression. "Rest assured, Mr. Vaughn. We'll get the marriage license today. They can consummate the marriage tonight." Ivy looked at her father in disbelief, her mind a complete blank. "No, this isn't how it's supposed to be." She threw herself at Ethan, crying, "Ethan, you're joking, right? Don't you love me the most? You were willing to die for me." Ethan took a step back, avoiding her touch with disgust. "Love," he sneered. "The person I loved was the kind girl from the charity gala 3 years ago, not you." Ivy looked as if she had been struck by lightning. "What do you mean?" "It means I made a mistake. I thought I was in love with you, but in reality, the person I fell for was your sister, Rosalind Ashwood." Ethan didn't spare her another glance, turning to his bodyguards. "What are you waiting for? Drag her away." "My great-uncle is waiting to consummate the marriage." No, I don't want to," Ivy screamed hysterically, completely devastated. But Ethan didn't even bother to look at her, signaling the bodyguards to drag her away. The party continued. Amid the clinking glasses and conversation, Richard Ashwood tried several times to approach Ethan, but was coldly rebuffed each time. As the party ended, Richard finally managed to corner Ethan as he was leaving. "Mr. Vaughn, about the partnership." "Of course," Ethan said, pointing to the parking lot. "Mr. Ashwood, please wait for me by that black Maybach, 10 meters away." Richard, suspecting nothing, eagerly ran over to the designated spot. The roar of an engine echoed through the parking lot. Ethan slammed his foot on the accelerator, and the Maybach shot forward like an arrow towards Richard Ashwood. Crash! Richard was thrown several meters, landing hard on the concrete, blood instantly staining the ground. "Tell the doctors," Ethan said, rolling down the window to his approaching bodyguards, to spare no expense in treating him. The black sports car sped along the winding mountain road, hitting speeds of 120 mph. The veins on Ethan's hands stood out as he gripped the steering wheel. It was only after an hour of driving that he slowly began to calm down. "Leary," he whispered, "I've finally gotten revenge for you." He dialed his assistant. "Arrange a private jet. I'm going to South City immediately." His assistant stammered, "Mr. Vaughn, I'm afraid it's too late." "What do you mean?" "Today is Miss Ashwood and Mr. Crestwood's wedding day." Ethan slammed on the brakes. "Wedding? What wedding? Isn't Julian Crestwood in a coma?" "That's what I was about to report to you," the assistant's voice trembled. "The day Miss Rosalind arrived in South City, Mr. Crestwood. He suddenly woke up." Chapter 16, South City, Hilton Hotel. Rosalind sat in the bridal dressing room, staring at her reflection in the mirror, still feeling as if she were in a daze. She had thought she would marry a man in a coma and live as a widow for the rest of her life. But fate had played a cruel joke on her the very first day she arrived at the Crestwood estate. Julian Crestwood had woken up. At the time, she was just standing by his bed, looking down at the man who had been asleep for years. His features were deep set, his long lashes casting a shadow on his pale face, as still as a painting. She sighed, thinking that if he weren't asleep, he would be an incredibly striking man. The next second, Julian's finger twitched. She jumped back, watching in astonishment as he slowly opened his eyes, his dark irises locking onto hers. The moment their eyes met, her voice trembled. "Doctor, he's awake." Everything after that was a blur. The Crestwood family was overjoyed. Doctors rushed in to examine him, and she just stood there in a corner, watching the man who was supposed to be asleep slowly regain consciousness. The Crestwood household was in chaos, with doctors, servants, and the Crestwood elders all rushing in. After confirming that Julian had indeed awakened, Mrs. Crestwood fell to her knees, clutching Rosalind's hands, tears streaming down her face. "Rosalind, you are the lucky star of our Crestwood family." Later, Julian asked to see her. When she entered his room, she assumed he was going to call off the engagement. After all, the Ashwood family had always been climbing to reach the Crestwoods' level. She had never understood why the Crestwood family had agreed to the marriage in the first place. Now that he was awake, there was even less reason for it to happen. But before she could speak, he said, "Miss Ashwood, do you know why the Crestwood family agreed to this marriage?" She shook her head. "We weren't agreeing to the Ashwood family." Julian's voice was soft, but every word was clear. "We were agreeing to the Liang family." "The Liang family, her mother's family." "Your mother and my mother were best friends," he said, looking at her trembling eyelashes. "They made a pact that if they had children, they would become in-laws." Rosalind's throat tightened. "After your mother passed away, you had a difficult time at the Ashwood home." Julian slowly sat up. "The Liang family always wanted to take you in, but the Ashwoods wouldn't let you go. It wasn't until your father proposed the marriage alliance that the Liang family saw an opportunity to get you away from them. So, Miss Ashwood, Whether I was awake or still asleep, I would never have married your sister. I would only marry you. I've been asleep for a long time, and I need to readjust to the business world. Julian suddenly smiled. But I promise you, I'm a capable man. I will protect you for the rest of your life, and so will the Crestwood family. From now on, you can spend as much money as you want, do whatever you want. He paused, his voice gentle. We may not have feelings for each other yet, but we can get to know each other after we're married. Take it slow. Are you willing to try? In that moment, Rosalind inexplicably nodded. Click. The dressing room door opened, interrupting her thoughts. Rosalind came back to her senses and realized Julian was standing behind her. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, his broad shoulders and narrow waist filling out the tuxedo perfectly. He leaned down and placed a kiss on the back of her neck, his warm breath sending a shiver down her spine. So shy, he chuckled. What are we going to do tonight? Who's shy? Her ears turned red. I just wasn't ready. I'm a seasoned veteran, you know. Oh. Julian raised an eyebrow, his tone as intimate as if they had been in love for years. So our Leary is quite experienced, is she? Rosalind's heart skipped a beat. What happened to taking it slow after marriage? Why is he acting like he's already deeply in love? What are you doing here? The ceremony hasn't started yet, has it? She said, trying to change the subject. I was afraid you'd be nervous, Julian said, taking her hand and lacing their fingers together. So we won't walk out separately. I'll walk with you. His palm was warm and dry, strangely reassuring. As they waited outside the banquet hall, Rosalind felt a sense of surrealism. She had imagined her own wedding countless times wearing a white gown, walking down the aisle on her father's arm, towards Ethan Vaughn. A sharp pain pricked her heart. She took a deep breath and forced the name out of her mind. Are you ready? Julian asked softly. Rosalind nodded and smiled back at him. The wedding march began, and the doors slowly opened. Hundreds of eyes turned to them, and Rosalind instinctively tightened her grip on Julian's hand. Don't be afraid, he whispered in her ear. I'm here. The guests on either side of the aisle whispered. What a perfect match. Mrs. Crestwood is so beautiful. I heard she's the one who woke Mr. Crestwood up. The Crestwood family has truly married a lucky star. From the day she arrived in South City, the entire Crestwood family had been unusually kind to her. There was no disdain, no difficulty, not even a single whisper of gossip. And now, the guests the Crestwood family had invited were all praising her, with no one mentioning the Ashwood family. It must have been Julian's doing. A warm feeling spread through her heart. During the ring exchange, the officiant smiled and asked, Mr. Julian Crestwood, do you take Miss Rosalind Ashwood to be your lawfully wedded wife, for richer or for poorer? I do, Julian answered without hesitation. Miss Rosalind Ashwood, do you take? She doesn't. The doors to the banquet hall burst open, and a tall figure stood silhouetted against the light. Rosalind froze and slowly turned around. Ethan stood at the entrance, his suit disheveled, his hair damp with sweat. He was breathing heavily, as if he had run all the way here. Leary, his voice was impossibly hoarse. Don't marry him. Chapter 17, the guests erupted in a commotion. Isn't that the prince of the Vaughn family? What did he just say? Don't marry him? Is he crashing the wedding? My God, the Crestwood heir just woke up, and now this is happening at his wedding. The whispers washed over her like a tide. Rosalind dug her nails into her palm, almost believing she was dreaming. Ethan Vaughn, what was he doing here? She watched as he walked towards her, step by step. His suit was a mess, his eyes were bloodshot, as if he hadn't slept in days. Don't marry him, he repeated, his voice raspy. Rosalind's fingertips trembled. She forced herself to remain calm. Ethan Vaughn, what are you doing here? She could hear the coldness in her own voice. Aren't you afraid your beloved Ivy Ashwood will get jealous? Ethan's breath caught, his eyes filled with a deep, agonizing pain. I was wrong, he said, his voice low and choked with emotion. Leary, the person I fell in love with 3 years ago was you, not Ivy. I've been blind and foolish all these years, loving the wrong person. Do you remember that charity gala 3 years ago when you climbed a tree to save a bird's nest? I fell in love with you at first sight that day, but I mistook you for Ivy. Rosalind's pupils constricted. Of course, she remembered that day she had been wearing a white dress, climbed a tree to save a teetering bird's nest, and when she came down, she saw a man standing behind the tree from a distance. She had assumed he was just a passerby and had hurried away. So, it was him. Seeing her stunned, Ethan thought she didn't believe him and desperately continued, "I've found out everything. I know Ivy has been lying to me all these years. You were the one who had a hard life in the Ashwood family, not her. She drugged your mother, causing her to die along with her unborn child. She bullied you since you were kids and forged a letter to make you lose your chance to study abroad. I'm sorry I didn't investigate properly. I let you suffer." With every word he spoke, Rosalind's heart clenched in pain. All her past grievances, her suffering, were laid bare so casually, as if a simple "I didn't investigate, I was wrong" could erase all the pain she had endured. She suddenly laughed, but her eyes were cold as ice. "So, you say you were wrong, that you didn't investigate, and that's supposed to make up for all the suffering I've been through?" Ethan's Adam's apple bobbed, his voice low, almost pleading. "Leary, I'm sorry, I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Make it up to me." She sneered. "Ethan Vaughn, do you remember what you did to me for Ivy?" He froze. Her words were like knives, carving into his heart. "At the auction, you bought out everything for her, leaving me with nothing. On Moonview Cliff, you risked your life to pick a flower for her. You tattooed her name over your heart, you let a mastiff tear into me because you were only focused on protecting her, and then you had me whipped 99 times in revenge for her." With every sentence she spoke, Ethan's face grew paler. By the end, he could barely stand, clenching his fists so tightly his nails dug into his palms. "I'm sorry?" His voice was hoarse, his eyes red. "Leary, please give me a chance." He spoke quickly, as if afraid of being interrupted. "I've already gotten revenge on everyone who bullied you. I've dealt with Ivy and your father. Ivy is married to my 60-year-old great-uncle, and I broke your father's legs." Rosalind was shocked. Before she could speak, Julian stepped in front of her, his face cold. "That's enough, Mr. Vaughn. Please have some self-respect." The pain in Ethan's eyes was instantly replaced by a fierce rage. He forced himself to calm down and looked at Julian. "Mr. Crestwood, you've only just woken up. How much affection could you possibly have for Leary? Why put on this act? If you're willing to let her go, I'll give you a 30% cut of all Vaughn Corporation's project profits." Chapter 18, the entire hall was in an uproar. The joint projects between the Crestwood and Vaughn corporations were worth billions. Ethan was willing to give it all up? Rosalind's heart pounded. She knew Julian was, at his core, a businessman. No one would refuse such a deal. But the next second, Julian sneered. "Not necessary." At the same time, the Crestwood family stood up one by one. Mrs. Crestwood even walked over to Rosalind and took her hand. "Leary is our family's daughter-in-law, not a commodity." Rosalind's eyes welled up, a wave of warmth washing over her. Ethan looked at them in disbelief. Finally, he turned back to Rosalind, his voice almost a desperate plea. "Leary, please, come with me, okay? I'll spend my whole life making it up to you." Rosalind closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were filled with a steely resolve. "No," she turned to the officiant. "Please continue the wedding." The pain in Ethan's eyes was instantly replaced by a crazed look. "Who dares?" he roared. His assistant rushed forward and whispered, "Mr. Vaughn, everything is in place outside." Rosalind's heart skipped a beat. She whirled around to face Ethan. "What have you done?" Ethan's eyes were bloodshot, his voice low and ruthless. "I've surrounded this place with explosives. If you don't agree to come with me, everyone in here dies together." The hall fell into a dead silence. A chill ran down Rosalind's spine. "You're insane. I am insane," he said, staring at her, every word deliberate. "If you marry someone else, I'll go completely mad." Ethan Vaughn, her voice trembled. "What do you want?" "Come with me," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "Give me one chance. I won't, then we all die together." Rosalind felt like she was being pushed to the brink, her nails digging into her palms. Just then, Julian took her hand, his voice calm and firm. "Then we all die together." The Crestwood family echoed in unison, "We stand together." But the guests panicked, falling to their knees and begging. "Miss Ashwood, please, just agree to go with him. This is between you two, don't drag us into it." "Yes, Miss Ashwood, we're just here for a wedding, we're innocent." Rosalind bit her lip hard. Finally, she took a deep breath. "Fine." She looked at Ethan, her voice as cold as ice. "I'll give you 1 week. After that, you are not to act like a madman again." A look of ecstatic joy lit up Ethan's eyes. "Deal." Julian tightened his grip on her hand. Leery, Rosalind looked at him and said softly, "Do you trust me? I'll only be gone for a week, okay?" Julian was silent for a long time before finally choosing to respect her decision and letting go of her hand. "Mrs." Crestwood handed her a small clutch. "Leery," she whispered, "there's something important inside. Look at it when you have a moment." Rosalind nodded and followed Ethan out. Ethan was eager to get her on his private jet, but Rosalind's cold voice stopped him. "If you dare take me out of South City, I'll die right here and you can blow everyone up." Ethan had to back down. Fine, we won't go. You like South City, so we'll stay here." He made a call and had the most expensive mansion in South City prepared. When Rosalind walked into the villa, she froze. The decor was exactly the same as her childhood home before her mother died. Ethan hugged her from behind and whispered, "Do you like it?" Rosalind sneered. "As I recall, you used to woo Ivy Ashwood with tricks like this, didn't you? Buying out auctions for her, getting a tattoo for her, even having me whipped 99 times because she got a single lash." A sharp pain shot through Ethan's heart. He held her tighter. "Leery, I will make it up to you." Chapter 19, Rosalind refused to believe him. Make it up to me? The wounds were already carved into her bones. How could he possibly make it up to her? She went into her room and slammed the door, only coming out when Ethan knocked to call her for dinner. When she opened the door, she was slightly taken aback. Ethan was wearing an apron, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing well-defined forearms. The dining table was set with several dishes, all fragrant and appealing, all her favorites. "You cooked," she raised an eyebrow. "Yes," he said in a low voice. "I didn't want anyone else to disturb us." Rosalind sneered. "Did you learn to cook for Ivy?" Ethan's hand froze, a flash of pain in his eyes. "Leery, please, don't mention her again, okay?" But she insisted on it. Throughout the meal, she stabbed at him with one verbal jab after another. "Ivy likes sweet things, right? Did you used to cook for her often? When you went to the cliff to pick that flower for her, did you ever think you might not make it back alive? When she saw her name tattooed over your heart, did she cry with joy?" Every word was a knife twisting in Ethan's heart. He went from initial pain to silence, and finally to a numb acceptance, too exhausted to even argue. But Rosalind felt a sense of satisfaction. After dinner, as she was about to go back to her room, Ethan suddenly called out to her. "Leery," he handed her a whip. Rosalind was stunned. "What is this for? 99 lashes?" His voice was hoarse. "I'm paying you back." She stared at him and sneered. "You think this will make up for it? It's not to make up for it." He looked up, his eyes dark. "It's what I owe you." He took a document out of his pocket and handed it to her. "I've already written my will. Even if you beat me to death, the Vaughn family won't trouble you. All of the Vaughn family's assets are left to you." Rosalind's fingers trembled, then she sneered. "Do you think I'm some naive girl you can fool with a few words?" Ethan looked at her, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm telling the truth." Before he could finish, crack, the whip struck his back hard. Ethan grunted, his back tensing, but he gritted his teeth and endured it without a sound. Rosalind showed no mercy. The second lash, the third, the sound of the whip cutting through the air was deafening in the silent apartment, accompanied by the sickening sound of flesh tearing and the smell of blood. Ethan remained standing, his back straight, never flinching. By the 99th lash, his back was a bloody mess, blood dripping from his clothes onto the floor, a shocking sight. He finally stumbled but forced himself to stand firm, reaching for Rosalind's hand. Rosalind looked at him coldly. "What? Regretting it? Wanna hit me back?" Ethan shook his head, his fingertips gently stroking her wrist, his voice weak. "Your hand hurt?" Rosalind froze. Then she violently pulled her hand back, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Ethan Vaughn, are you pathetic?" He managed a weak, pained smile. "As long as you're happy, you can say whatever you want about me." His gentleness was unbearable. Rosalind turned to leave, but he called out to her again. "There's one more thing." He handed her a knife. Rosalind frowned. "What are you trying to do now?" Ethan raised a hand and tore open his blood-soaked shirt, revealing the glaring tattoo over his heart. "Ivy." "Carve it out," he said hoarsely. Rosalind sneered. "What, you don't want to keep her name anymore?" Before she could finish, Ethan suddenly grabbed her hand and plunged the tip of the knife into his own chest. Squelch blood gushed out instantly. Rosalind's pupils constricted. She tried to pull her hand away, but he held it tight. "Don't move," He was in so much pain that veins bulged on his forehead, but he held on, guiding her hand as he slowly carved out the piece of flesh. Blood streamed down his chest, staining his pants and her hand. Rosalind's fingers trembled, her breathing almost stopping. But Ethan seemed to feel no pain. After he had carved it all out, he held her hand again and, one stroke at a time, carved a new name over his heart, Liri. When the last stroke was done, he could barely stand, but he forced himself to look at her, a smile on his lips. "Leary," his voice was as light as a sigh, "I love you." With that, he fainted, collapsing to the floor. The blood spread out beneath him, like a blooming spider lily. Rosalind stood there, the knife clattering to the floor. She looked at the blood-soaked floor and suddenly thought the cruelest revenge in the world wasn't hate. It was him, willing to carve out his own heart for her, while she could no longer bring herself to trust him. Chapter 20, Ethan had a dream. In the dream, it was a sunny day in the garden of the charity gala. He didn't make that phone call. Instead, he stood under the tree, watching the girl in the white dress carefully place the bird's nest back on the branch. She jumped down lightly, dusted off her dress, and when she looked up, her eyes met his. He walked over to her, his voice low and gentle. "Hello, my name is Ethan Vaughn. I'd like to get to know you." The girl blinked, tilting her chin up proudly. "Oh, why?" "Because you're beautiful," he chuckled. She huffed, but the tips of her ears turned red. "Since you like me so much, I suppose I can condescend to let you get to know me." He stifled a laugh, finding her impossibly cute. The dream unfolded perfectly. He pursued her. She reluctantly agreed. He spoiled her rotten. She snuggled in his arms and played cute, and finally, they walked down the aisle, exchanging rings amidst the blessings of everyone they knew. He leaned down to kiss her, and she whispered, her face red, "Ethan Vaughn, you have to be good to me forever." "Always," he smiled and promised. "Forever." "Mr. Vaughn, Mr. Vaughn," the doctor's voice ripped him from his dream. Ethan's eyes flew open. He was met with the sight of a white ceiling, the sharp pain in his back and chest a brutal reminder of reality. There was no wedding, no love, only devastating wounds. "Where is Miss Ashwood?" he asked hoarsely. "In the garden," the doctor replied. Ignoring the doctor's protests, Ethan forced himself out of bed and staggered towards the garden. Sunlight dappled the flowers. Rosalind stood there, her fingers gently stroking a rose, her profile breathtakingly beautiful in the light. He was about to approach her when he heard her laugh softly into her phone, "I miss you too." The blood in Ethan's veins turned to ice. Her tone was tinged with a shyness and a hint of flirtation he had never heard before. "Husband," she said softly. The word was a knife plunging into Ethan's heart. He rushed over and grabbed her wrist. "What are you doing?" Rosalind was startled but quickly regained her composure, raising an eyebrow at him. "I'm talking to my husband. What's wrong with that?" "Don't call him husband," his voice was hoarse, his eyes bloodshot. "I'll say it if I want to," Rosalind sneered. "Husband, husband, husband," with every word she said, Ethan's face grew paler. Finally, his eyes reddened and his voice trembled. "Leary, don't do this to me." Rosalind froze. She had never seen this side of Ethan humbled, broken, as if she had personally shattered all his pride. "This is all karma, isn't it?" He managed a pained smile that was more like a grimace. "You can kill me, just don't do this to me." Rosalind's throat tightened. Before she could speak, Ethan had already composed himself, his voice low. "I'm sorry I wasn't with you last night." He paused and took her hand. "I have a surprise for you today." Night fell. Ethan took her to an outdoor arena. Rosalind had expected some kind of performance, but then the announcer's booming voice echoed, "Tonight's special event, Mr. Ethan Vaughn versus the Tibetan Mastiff. Black Death." Rosalind shot to her feet. "Are you insane?" But Ethan just smiled at her gently. "The pain you suffered, I'll repay it 100-fold." The cage opened, and the massive mastiff roared as it charged out. Ethan met it barehanded and was instantly knocked to the ground. "Ethan Vaughn," Rosalind screamed. The mastiff's teeth tore into his arm, blood spurting out, but Ethan just grunted and punched the mastiff in the eye. The crowd gasped. The fight was brutally intense. Every lunge from the mastiff was a deadly threat. Ethan was covered in blood, but he never backed down. Finally, he grabbed the mastiff by the throat and, to the horror of everyone watching, strangled it until it stopped breathing. The arena was silent. Ethan staggered to his feet, a bloody mess, but he walked over to Rosalind and knelt before her, a look of submission on his face. I was bitten 10 times, he said, looking up at her, his voice hoarse. 10 times the repayment. Leary, can you forgive me now? Rosalind's fingers trembled. You're truly insane, but Ethan smiled. He took her hand and pressed it against his blood-stained cheek, his eyes filled with a possessive and gentle madness. I am insane. I've been insane for a long time. Leary, only you can cure me. Chapter 21, for the next 3 days, Ethan exhausted every romantic gesture he could think of. On the first day, he took her to the tallest Ferris wheel in North City. They say that couples who kiss at the top will be together forever, he said, standing at the entrance to the cabin, his eyes filled with a cautious hope. Rosalind sneered. Then we should kiss at the bottom, so we'll never see each other again in the next life. The light in Ethan's eyes dimmed, but he forced a smile. That's fine. I just wanted to show you the city lights. When the Ferris wheel reached its highest point, the entire city was spread out below them. Ethan suddenly dropped to one knee and took out a diamond ring. Leary, his voice was hoarse. If we could start over, there are no do-overs, she cut him off, turning to look out the window. On the second day, he cooked her an extravagant feast. I remember you like spicy food, he said, placing a piece of poached fish in her bowl, his eyes gentle. Try it? Rosalind glanced at it. Ivy doesn't eat spicy food, so you never used to make this, did you? Ethan's hand froze in midair. In front of him, she scraped all the food into the trash. On the third day, he took her to the beach. As night fell, drones formed the shape of her smiling face in the sky, and fireworks exploded, spelling out L-I-R-I, I love you. Do you like it? He asked softly. Rosalind looked at the brilliant sky and suddenly smiled. Ethan Vaughn, did you woo Ivy like this too? He clenched his fists, his throat tight. No, only you, his voice was barely a whisper. All of this is only for you. Rosalind remained unmoved. Back in her room, Rosalind remembered that tomorrow was her last day. As she started to pack, she opened the clutch Mrs. Crestwood had given her. Inside was a manila envelope, the edges slightly yellowed, as if it had been handled many times. She hesitated, then opened it. A stack of letters slid out. Every letter began with, to my Leary. First letter. Leary, I saw you for the first time today at the Liang family's banquet. You were wearing a white dress, feeding a cat in the garden. It was so lively all around, but you seemed to be in your own quiet world. I watched you from the second floor for a long time. You finally noticed me and smiled. In that moment, I knew I was done for. Julian, second letter. Leary, I heard that illegitimate daughter of the Ashwoods was bothering you again. I had the butler send you some medicine in the Crestwood family's name. I hope you used it. I wanted to come see you myself, but I couldn't find a good reason. Julian, third letter. Leary, today is your 18th birthday, and the anniversary of your mother's death. I flew to North City and waited outside the cemetery all day. I saw you sitting alone by the grave, crying. I left your favorite blueberry cake at the gate. I hope you had a piece. Julian, last letter. Leary, your father came to propose a marriage between our families. I know he wants his second daughter to marry into our family. I know it's a trap, but I agreed anyway. Because it was the only way I could marry you. If you are reading this letter, it means we are already married. Please don't be afraid of this marriage. I didn't marry you out of pity. From the first time I saw you when I was 16, I have been waiting for this day. Julian, the letters slipped from Rosalind's hand. She remembered the look in Julian's eyes when he woke up, that restrained, deep gaze. It wasn't the politeness of a stranger, but years of hidden love. Chapter 22, on the morning of the fourth day, she stood in the living room and looked at him calmly. The week is up, I'm leaving. Ethan, who was making coffee, paused. I did say I would let you go, he said, turning to face her, his eyes dark. But on one condition, you have to choose go back to Julian Crestwood or stay with me. Rosalind sneered. I choose to go to. Before she could finish, Ethan suddenly pulled out a revolver and pressed it to his own temple. 2 choices, his voice was terrifyingly calm. You stay or you leave. This gun has 4 bullets. 3 are blanks. 1 is live. He cocked the hammer. For every word you say next, I will pull the trigger. The meaning was clear. Only if she said, I'll stay, would he live. If she said she was leaving, he would surely die. Rosalind's pupils constricted. You're insane. You're using your own life to threaten me? No, he chuckled. I'm just making a bet. Betting on whether you care about me at all. She stared at him, her chest heaving. Ethan Vaughn, she gritted her teeth. Don't make me hate you. Then hate me. His eyes were possessive and gentle. At least it's better than forgetting me. After a long silence, Rosalind took a deep breath. Bang, the first shot was a blank. Ethan didn't even blink. Bang, the second shot was also a blank. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but he still smiled at her. Keep going. Rosalind's fingers trembled, but her voice was eerily calm. Bang, the third shot was a blank. Leave, the fourth shot. Bang, blood instantly gushed from Ethan's chest. He staggered back a few steps and collapsed, but he was still smiling. Leary, he said, his mouth full of blood, his voice as light as a sigh. You're so cruel. Rosalind stood there, her nails digging into her palms. She watched as his blood spread across the floor, watched as his pupils slowly dilated, watched as the paramedics rushed in and carried him away. She never once looked back. 1 month later, in South City, Julian threw her a grand wedding to make up for the first one. A white gown, red roses, the blessings of everyone. The priest asked, Miss Rosalind Ashwood, do you take Mr. Julian Crestwood to be your lawfully wedded wife, for richer or for poorer? She looked at the gentle man before her and said softly, I do. As they exchanged rings, Julian suddenly whispered, his condition is not good. Rosalind's fingers trembled. The doctors said the bullet was only a centimeter from his heart. It's a miracle he's alive. Julian watched her closely, but he may never wake up. Rosalind was silent for a long time before finally smiling. Let's not talk about him. She stood on her toes and kissed the corner of Julian's mouth. For the rest of our lives, Mr. Crestwood, I'm in your care. Julian returned the kiss gently. Mrs. Crestwood, I'm in yours. Late that night, after the wedding, Rosalind stood alone on the balcony. The moonlight glinted on the diamond ring on her finger. She suddenly remembered, a long time ago, the bodyguard who always followed her with a cold expression. She remembered the knife he had taken for her, the warmth of his back as he carried her home in the rain, the look in his eyes when he had said, Leary, I will love you with my life. And she remembered the way he had looked, lying in a pool of his own blood, smiling as he called her cruel. The night wind dried the tears at the corners of her eyes. She whispered, Goodbye, Ethan Vaughn, and never see you again.